So it should just be me speaking, the power.
Me and you. All
I
right.
think it's just
So
us. Okay.
thank you, Chris. Chris from Protect Your Boundaries is with us. I am on the road, so I will talk as little as humanly possible. Chris, thank you so much for doing this. Maybe you can give us just a quick rundown of what Protect Your Boundaries is all about, and maybe tell us about your success with training sessions in the time of COVID, and then take it away. Give us the goods.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll do. Well, thanks, Irene, for having me. It's always a pleasure to work with you guys. It's actually been, I think, over a year since we came into your office and did a session. But yeah, I think so. But I've always enjoyed you guys because I do recognize that both Keller Williams as a brand, but also your office in particular, you guys really do pay a lot of attention to the details, and not just the easy stuff like the staging and the advertising and the promotion and stuff like that, but the difficult stuff as well. And so that's why when clients do get into trouble, they come to you. And that's something that we're going to talk about today, and why I think this particular session is so important, to you. David, I think you've seen this one before, so there's going to be a test for you at the end, okay? But you've been through this one. So by way of introduction, Protect Your Boundaries, for those of you who don't know us, we are technically speaking a land survey firm. We're surveyors by trade. What that means is that we really understand land, or we're supposed to really understand land, and all the nuances of what it means to be a landowner, and boundaries and surveys and disputes and all those wonderful things. And what we've done as Protect Your Boundaries is two things. The first thing we've done is we've curated the single largest database of survey plans for all residential and commercial properties in Ontario. And in the GTA specifically, which is what you care about, we have, I think, 85% coverage, something like that. So if you ever need a survey plan, an existing survey plan for a property, come to our site, protectyourboundaries.ca, and check it out. The other thing that we've done is we've dedicated ourselves the last 5 years to taking all this sometimes overly complex land information and contextualize it and make it digestible and usable by the real estate industry, and specifically those realtors who truly care about providing that extra level of knowledge and service and safety net to their client, which is why we love working with you guys, because that's what you guys are all about. So in that vein, and I'm going to switch over and share my screen. One of the things we launched just 7 months ago, was something called the Boundary Wise Academy. And the Boundary Wise Academy was us saying, okay, so we're going to go from doing these in-house ad hoc presentations where we teach how to read a survey plan, title insurance, disputes, easements and right-of-ways, all these other really important land-related things that are so important for you guys. And we're actually going to boost it up and turn it into a professional, recognized accreditation. So the Boundary Wise Academy is something that you guys can all register for, enroll in, and we'll go through all those details at the end after we've gone through the learning today. And out of it, once you've taken the exams, once you've passed, you then become a certified Boundary Wise agent, CBW. And that is so important given what AREA came out with at the beginning of this year, before the whole COVID thing, in terms of basically saying, you got to get credentialed. You've got to make sure that if you're talking like an expert, you've got the accreditations and the credentials behind you to support that. And that's what we have stepped into. We're supported by them. We're supported by Terranet and GeoWarehouse. We're supported by the Ministry of Government Services. We're supported by all kinds of different organizations out there. And we're having a blast. We've got about, 200, 250 agents already accredited and out there, and we're promoting them. You might have heard our ads on the radio so far. So please, at the end of this, take the information down, come and check it out. And I promise you, you won't be disappointed in how it helps boost your business. So let's get started, because today we are talking about boundary disputes and has your neighbor crossed the line. As Irene alluded to, this is not the sexiest of topics, but it certainly is important. Once in a while, we find a little cheeky little catchphrase there, has your neighbor crossed the line, haha, very funny, but anyway. But here's the important thing. This is all about boundary disputes. And as much as we sometimes take pleasure in the misfortune of others, and we lament the problems other people are having. When it comes to us, and it happens to us, I gotta tell you people, this thing is miserable. Boundary disputes are one of the most miserable things that can happen to you as a homeowner, because you can't just move and you can't just get rid of the neighbor. And the resolution is not always the prettiest. Now, here's why this is so important to you, I believe. You, as a real estate professional, in a typical life cycle with any given customer, you will prospect them, you will engage with them, and with any luck, you will win the listing. And certainly with the boundary-wise accreditation, you stand a better chance winning that listing. You win the listing, the house gets sold. When's the next time you get a touch point with that client, a meaningful touch point with that client? Well, you hope it's when they sell that house to buy the next one. Is that going to be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? You don't know. But what you are trying to do always is you're trying to have those meaningful touch points between those two transactional events that helps remind that client of your value so that they don't go and, they don't go off with the next realtor that they think they like. You're trying to keep that loyalty in place so you can get the repeat business. We all know how much less expensive it is to get an existing customer to buy from you again than it is to go out and get a new customer all over again. Understanding boundary disputes and understanding how to resolve boundary disputes and the kind of advice you can give your client is incredibly useful in that regard, because when your client calls you, and hopefully they do, and says, I am in a boundary dispute with my neighbor, what do I do? This is what today is all about. And in a more expanded version, the Academy teaches you as well. But please understand, it's one thing to say, here's the advice you give your client. Understand that the reason why we're doing this is because we know it helps drive you business. At the end of the day, we understand that. And that's everything that we do here is around how do you provide value that drives your business at the same time. So enough of all of that. Here's what we're going to talk about today. What is a boundary dispute? How do they happen and why do you care? We're going to talk about the kinds of things you can suggest to a client, the different pathways you can take with a boundary dispute. And there's a very limited number of them. We're going to talk a little bit about the costs of boundary disputes, so that when your client says, I'm going to sue my neighbor, then you can say, easy there, Tiger. It might not be that easy for you. What the best advice is you can give your client, and finally, how to avoid them in the first place. And then at the end, we'll touch on the Boundary Wise Academy, if you guys will indulge me at the end for a couple of minutes. Fair enough? Okay, here we go. What is a boundary dispute? Now, all through here, we've inserted some pictures we got off the web, which we absolutely love. And for me, I love thinking about what is the story behind this. You see the final picture. There are so many stories you can make up about how it got to that point. But here's somebody spray painting on the back of their fence. Look, Bob, I've painted my fence. I wonder what the story is behind that. What is a boundary dispute? Well, technically speaking, there's no definition, no formal definition, of course. But to us, what we've experienced is that a boundary dispute is a disagreement between neighbors over their rights and duties with respect to adjacent or nearby real property. To put it in a much simpler way, two neighbors disagree as to where the property boundary is. If you both agree where the boundary is, chances are you're not going to have a boundary dispute. If you disagree with where the boundary is, if you and I are living next to each other and I build my fence, or the fence where I think the boundary is on the boundary, but you believe that the boundary is actually a foot closer to me, further away from you, then you believe I've built the fence a foot into your property. And so it's the disagreement between where the boundary is that is the genesis of most boundary disputes. It also happens with easements as well. We'll talk about that in a minute. And as you all know, boundary disputes can range in severity from a mild annoyance, you smile fakely at your neighbor while you walk away grumbling under your breath and just live with the annoyance, to full-blown lawsuits that can take years, if not decades, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to resolve. We'll talk about that as well. So all manner of disputes, but at the end of the day, these are miserable processes, miserable things to go through. And you want to try and help your client avoid them in the first place. And if they do happen, help them with great advice on how to get through them in a way that they can keep their sanity. So here's an example of a property that we surveyed a couple of years ago. I know, really bad picture, but it just shows that nothing's ever really that clean and tidy as it is in a diagram or something. But in this picture, we're standing at the rear of a property here, right at the back. My back is against the rear fence here. And so right in the distance there in the foreground would be the houses, the house and the road. And you see a fence there, a chain link fence, that delineates two properties. Now, our client is on the other side of that fence. That's their property. I'm standing on the neighbor's fence. And this fence had been built by the neighbor on where the neighbor believed or pretended to believe the boundary was. Now, don't forget, some people will try and steal some land, knowing full well where the boundary is. Okay, there's a way of resolving that. You'll also, but our client was convinced that that fence was way in on her property. So she contracted us. She had the conversation with the neighbor. The neighbor said, no, it's on the boundary, go away. So the client did what they should do, contact a surveyor, us in this case. We went and staked it out. You'll see right in the middle of that picture is a wooden stake painted red. That is actually the location of the boundary right there. So you can see that this fence was built 18 inches over the property line. So this right here is the genesis of the boundary dispute. And now we provide the information that says definitively, here's where the boundary is. There is an encroachment. Now it's up to the neighbors to figure it out. But this is so common, guys. This happens all the time. We see this over and over and over. And sometimes it's a mistake. Other times it's intentional. Wow, the number of calls that we get is quite something. So why do boundary disputes happen? Now, this picture is a picture of some of our best work. And we just want you to know that we are the only surveyors in Ontario where for an extra fee, we will write really rude signs to try and help you. No, not really. We don't really do that, but cool sign, right? Somebody got really frustrated here. So why do boundary disputes happen? Well, we've kind of touched on them, but it's one thing to talk about how do you resolve a boundary dispute once things go bad, but you have an opportunity to help clients in some cases avoid a dispute before they actually purchase. And so the root cause is that, as we talked about, is the disagreement between two parties over the location of the boundary, or it's a disagreement over their rights and duties relative to the boundary and any easements. However, the kind of things that we end up hearing are things like, you built the fence on my side of the line, or my neighbor has built their deck or their driveway or their path or their patio on my property, or my neighbor's not respecting my right-of-way easement. My neighbor just cut down my hedge or my tree or prize roses, these kinds of things. These disputes can range in all manner of types, I guess. And it often does come back to that sale and purchase. So here's what tends to happen. Because most realtors want to try and avoid the parcel register, the survey plan, boundary due diligence, confirming the extent of title, which astonishes me that you're not actually legislated to do this stuff, because at the end of the day, you're transacting land. How is it that you can completely ignore the land itself when you're transacting land and say, oh, it's the lawyer's job, and the lawyer says, well, title insurance will cover it. Wow, how many times can we kick that can down the road and then let the homeowner deal with all the downfall and the garbage that happens after that? But here's what happens. The listing agent doesn't fully represent easements. Huge, huge reason why boundary disputes happen. The listing agent doesn't fully represent the easements. The buying agent doesn't look into them. The buyer isn't any the wiser, buys the property, all of a sudden finds out that their use of land cannot be satisfied, or that the neighbor is actually using a piece of their land that they're not entitled to use in a particular way. And now they're left having to deal with that argument. It all boils back to the fact that the listing agent didn't represent or fully represent the easements. Or, very similar, the listing agent didn't fully represent boundary issues. As a listing agent, you know, guys, you're in the GTA, it's going to sell, right? And it's probably going to sell above asking, depending on what your pricing strategy is. But it's going to sell. David, you're laughing, I know. But come on, it's going to sell, right? So disclose this stuff. If anything you don't disclose, and obviously this is a conversation you have with your brokerage, but anything you don't disclose represents an opportunity for the buyer to either get out of the deal, if it can be construed as being substantive enough, or gives them an opportunity to come back on you, create a title insurance claim, or any other action after the fact. It's not worth it. Our philosophy is always expect to disclose everything. And if you're not going to disclose something, there better be a really good reason for it. But when the listing agent doesn't fully represent the fact that the fence is off the property line, way off the property line, or there's an issue with the neighbor regarding a shed or something or other, or that something was built accidentally too close or over the property line, that's leaving you, your business, your career in jeopardy there. It's like a trap that's been left behind you, just waiting to be stepped on. On the other side, you've got a buying agent that didn't do their own due diligence. Guys, you know better, right? You know better. I know you guys do great due diligence, but please join the Boundary Wise Academy and really learn how to do this stuff well. It doesn't take long, and it puts so many great safety nets underneath your deal, your client, and you. But when the buying agent doesn't do their due diligence, they're basically saying, I trust everything that the selling agent, the listing agent is saying, and or I really don't care, let's just get this transaction done and let me move on to the next one. We all know brands that operate like that. And also, the buying agent didn't investigate the actual versus legal use of land. Maybe there was an easement on the property. So they just said to the owner, oh, there's an easement on the property. What is it? Oh, it's probably a hydro easement or something. Well, is it? Or is it the next door property or the rear property that actually has legal access rights over that strip, which means that your client cannot use that in the way they may not, in the way that they wish. A buyer's intended use of land has to be of the most paramount, importance to you, right? When you're looking at, does this home satisfy their needs? And there are things that they can't see. They can't see easements. They can't see boundaries. They can't see the implications of disputes or potential encroachments. You can, though. With us, you can, and you can advise them in a way that most agents in Ontario simply have no clue or desire to do. But these are the 4 reasons why it often comes back to the sale and purchase of the property. So cause and effect, those of you who've been around with me for a while know that from our research, 49% of properties in the GTA have hidden boundary issues. And hidden boundary issues to us were, this was a significant research project that we did. What we determined, what we defined as a boundary issue was something that was substantial enough that people would go to court over it. People would actually hire a lawyer and spend money and pursue legal action over it. And so a fence being off the property line 3 or 4 inches, we didn't count. It had to be more than 8 or 9 inches. I think it was 10 inches in cities and over a foot in rural areas. That kind of thing. Sheds, and then any sort of encroachment, a shed, a pool, a deck, a patio, a driveway built over the property line. And what we also found was that the #1 trigger for a hidden dispute, it's just been sitting there, flaring up into a full-blown dispute, is the sale of the property or the neighboring property. You know how it happens, right? 2 people are living next to each other for years and years and years. They've kind of, they've sort of come into a comfortable arrangement on how the land between their 2 buildings is used. That strip of land, the driveway, there's actually an easement on it that clearly defines who owns what and what the rights are, but whatever, they've kind of used it, put the hockey nets there, built an air conditioning unit, all that stuff. The next door neighbor sells, new owner moves in, says, okay, no, there's an easement here. Here's the footprint of it. Get your air conditioner off it. You can't. All of a sudden, you're in a boundary dispute with your neighbor. And you're saying, yeah, but it's been like this for years. And this is how the neighbor and I decided to use it. Understand that when it comes to easements, there's no adverse possession. There's no getting around the rules of easements. Well, there is in some exceptional cases. But in most cases, a judge is going to say easement law is the easement law. Actually, a good lawyer, before you get to a judge, is going to say, forget it. Easements are easements. If you have misunderstood or didn't understand the implications, done. The easement is the easement. It always snaps back. And the thing is, you're in the hot seat. And you're in the hot seat because you carry the emotional weight through the transaction. From the time when the buyer contacts you and says, oh, we're so excited about buying a house, to the point where they move in, and afterwards, it's not the lawyer who carries the emotional weight. It's not anyone else. It's you guys who carry all that emotion, and you're trying to navigate a very complex and important transaction with all this emotional baggage on top of it, which means that they're counting on you to be the experts and the all-knowing oracles of everything to do with the transaction, and probably other stuff as well. And it's not necessarily fair on you, but it does put you in that hot seat, and it puts you in a position where you can take advantage of opportunities. You should also know that we are at an all-time high in title insurance claims because there are so many issues out there. And realtors are targets in title insurance's company to recoup their costs. It goes up against your insurance. It's unpleasant. It takes you out of the game for a while. You don't need that. You need to be out there doing what's core in your business. And that is prospecting, closing, selling, moving on, right? Now, you get asked for advice, and quite often we see you guys getting dragged in. The purpose of today is to make sure you can give advice without getting dragged in. Another example here, here's a client of ours. The client was actually, both of these homeowners were clients. So 2 homeowners built these houses 50 years ago, whenever it was. The folks on the right sold to a young couple who moved in with the red Toyota there. They moved in, and the realtor had actually purchased a survey plan of the property prior to close, prior to bidding, actually. This is the house they wanted. They wanted to make sure of things, of boundary things. So the realtor came to protect your boundaries and bought the survey, and they understood what they were going into when they bought it. They buy the house, they move in. They go across to the next door neighbor and say, hey, we're your new neighbors. And just to let you know, it is our intent, watch the language here, to move our fence onto the property line. Our fence onto the property line. To which the next door neighbor says, welcome, not on your life are you moving the fence onto my property. A fundamental disagreement as to where the property line was. So what happened was that the neighbor that remained believed that the property line was exactly where the fence is, that the fence was built in the property line. He went up and down the neighbor saying, nope, my buddy and I next door built it. It was where the old fence was. That's the property line. Look, it goes parallel to the driveway. You are not moving it. It stays where it is. The new couple said, well, hang on a second. We got a survey plan that says, no, that's not where the boundary is, that the fence is actually way in on our property. It's our fence. We're moving it. So the next door neighbor calls us. Good move, right? Calls us and says, I want you to come out and do a boundary stakeout to show these people where the boundary is. And we look at the address and we're like, this looks familiar. We get back to me and said, they bought a survey plan. Have they not shown it to you? He says, yes, but it's wrong. Like, all right, it's wrong, right? And we're like, no, it's not wrong. It's right. You know, don't spend the money, go based on that survey plan. To which he says, no, it's wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. Come out and do a stakeout. So we did, and the orange stakes are where the boundary is. So, you know, we tried, and then we took his money, but we got paid up front, which is important. You'll know with us, we always get paid up front. As any professional who delivers bad news or has a good chance of delivering bad news, you got to get paid up front, right? But anyway, this was resolved because the next door neighbors, when they moved in, the agent had the foresight to get a survey plan, study it, and give the buyers that choice to say, look, there's a potential issue here. The fence, it's on your property. This is where the boundary is. This is all your land. There may be an issue here with the neighbor. And they said, notwithstanding all of that, we still love it. We want to buy it. Thank you for giving us the tools we need to be able to resolve our issue if it ever comes up. So really good example there of a great agent who did a good job. So how to resolve a boundary dispute. David, if you remember, we have a very detailed flow diagram here that we often show. We're not doing this, that's saved for the academy. But I want to break it down into two simple things. Here's what you do. Here's the advice you give. Here's what you do if you end up in a boundary dispute. The first thing you have to do is confirm where the boundary is. And it's not where you think it is. It's not where your neighbor thinks it is. It's not where the fence is. Guys, 99% of fences in the GTA are not on the boundary. It is definitely not where the fence is, or where the grass is cut at different height, because that's where the neighbor's been cutting it for years. It's none of those things. The only way you can truly determine where the boundary is from a survey. You can use an existing survey and measure it out yourself. It's approximate, but not bad. Or you can get a surveyor out to stake it out and mark it for you. But before you go any further, please make sure that your assertion as to where the boundary is correct. One of you is going to be wrong, right? If there's a dispute, one of you is wrong. Don't automatically assume that because your opinion is yours, that it's right? Obviously. So once you've determined where the boundary is, your next step and the easiest path, the least expensive path, is to resolve it with your neighbor. And we all hope that we have a neighbor who's just misunderstood. They had a different opinion where the boundary is, and when you show them definitive evidence of where it actually is and their error, that they'll say, oh my goodness, thank you, no, I was wrong, leave the fence where it is, or yes, put it where you're saying. We hope that that is what happens, and oftentimes that is what happens. Other times the neighbor says, as we saw in the previous example, the survey's wrong, take it back, the fence is right. Well, difficult to deal with. Other times you've got neighbors who've intentionally stolen the land as a challenge and know it's going to be expensive for you to claim it back. Those are other situations that you need to really get professionals involved in. And when we talk about professionals, we're talking about surveyors and lawyers. But your first pathway and the path of least resistance is try to resolve it with your neighbor in a constructive and collaborative, mediative way. because that is the way you save your relationship with your neighbor. It's the way you create sanity in your life, and the way you get through without having to remortgage your house for lawyers fees. If none of that works, you got to hire a lawyer. And you don't hire a real estate lawyer because their specialty is closing. You hire a lawyer that specializes in litigation, and specifically land litigation. And you're going to spend anywhere from $350 to $600, $700 an hour for that. You're not going to get away with less than $5,000, and it can cost you tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this. So approach this with caution, and all of a sudden what we find is when clients see what that's going to cost, all of a sudden resolving it with their neighbors becomes far more attractive pathway that they're willing to lean into. There is a third way, a third option, that's walk away. We don't promote walking away out of fear of confrontation as a good strategy. You own the land, you know they're encroaching on your land. That's yours, you've paid for it, you own it. According to the law, you own it. You need to stand up for your rights. But if you've got into a dispute and you feel like you're in danger in some way, or you just don't want the aggravation and you just don't want to deal with it, that is okay to say, listen, I'm walking away. It's a strategic choice for your sanity's sake. And oftentimes we find people say, listen, I got to live in this neighborhood for the next 20 years. I'm raising my kids here. I don't want to have this kind of relationship with my neighbor. I'm just going to walk away. But again, call us, because there's certain documentation you might want to get in place in order to make sure that that land cannot be claimed through adverse possession and so on in the future. Guys, I think my earbuds have just run out of battery. Give me a second while I switch over, okay? 1 sec, okay?
We can't hear you, Chris. Chris? Can't hear you. We can't hear you. Ah, there we go. It looked like you were talking. We can hear you now.
Okay, we're going to
Like
switch back to the...
Couldn't hear you, so that's what I was trying to get your attention. No, we're good.
Okay, perfect. All right, we'll try with these earbuds and see what happens. Okay, so this is what you do. You either resolve it with your neighbor, hire a lawyer, or walk away strategically. Here's what you don't do. Don't try getting free help from people who don't give a damn and whose job it isn't to help you. Don't go to the city. The city doesn't care. Don't go to the police. It's not a criminal matter. Even though you think the most important thing in the world at this moment in time is not Middle East peace or the coronavirus, it's the fact that your neighbor has stolen, you believe, an inch of your land. The police do not care. It's not a criminal matter. It's a civil matter. Now, when you're going to speak to your client, tell them that. Please make sure you don't give them definitive advice, because sometimes boundary disputes can go from civil to criminal if there's harassment or abuse or something like that. So be very careful in how you advise. Don't be quite so definitive as I'm being with you. Technically, though, a boundary dispute in and of itself is not a matter that the police are going to deal with. Don't bother with your MP. They're going to write a letter only if you've donated handsomely to their previous election campaign, but that's not going to get you anywhere. And go to a surveyor only if you actually want to get the survey, the boundary confirmed. Don't go to ask them, as we get. Poor Amanda in our office, she'll get people on the phone for 45 minutes. We actually had to go through some significant training with Amanda to show how to get people off the phone, because we're not therapy. Neither are you. You're not therapy either, right? So again, for you, this is the advice you can give. Don't go to the city, don't go to the police, don't go to your MP. Go to a surveyor to get it staked out, or at least a survey plan, and then resolve it with your neighbor. If you can't figure that out, go and spend a fortune with a lawyer, or walk away if you just can't be bothered to deal with it. It's that simple, guys. Now, there's an exception to all of this. Trees, boundary trees. Boundary tree disputes are different. We've got a webinar on YouTube that we did about a month ago. Really, really interesting how trees are completely different from any other object in your yard that can encroach. We're not going to dig into that today because we're almost out of time. Remedies and costs. So if this fella here was actually arguing over 2 inches, I'd say forget about it, don't worry about it. But anyway, that's just us from our experience. The cost of resolving a boundary dispute, if you go the legal route, it's going to end up being handled by the Office of Land Titles under the Land Titles Act, the Boundaries Act. It'll end up in a title insurance claim and or legal proceedings and court. All of these take many thousands of dollars, oftentimes hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they can take many years. The court system right now, it's taking at least a decade to handle boundary disputes. And what's interesting is that the first ruling is never the last. The first ruling goes through, it's immediately appealed. Usually it's appealed. There is so much skin in the game from the side that lost, it's cheaper for them to appeal or chase the part that they got a losing hand on in the hopes that they can bluff their way into a win. You end up in appeal after appeal. Some of these things are up at the Supreme Court 20 years later, 15 years later, they're resolved. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Way, way more than the land is actually worth. Another example here, here's our client. And it's funny how whenever we take pictures of our clients, they've always got this dejected look with their shoulders stooped. And that's bad news that we give, right? Again, get paid up front. So in this case, our client bought the house on the left and was told by the agent that there's a mutual driveway, the boundary's somewhere between the house, and there's an easement that forms a mutual driveway that allows both parties to share the driveway so they can get to the back of the garage there. So they were using it, and they were parking there, they were letting the kids out, it's what you do, right? The next door neighbor got really upset with this and said, I want you to stop parking your car there, opening the doors, putting all your junk out there, stuff falling into my window wells. I want you to stop, to which our client said, no, I'm allowed to use this. I'm allowed to stop here. I'm allowed to go to the back, whatever else he said. The next door neighbor decided to show him. So he built a fence, and that's the fence that the next door neighbor built. And the next door neighbor built it on what he said was the boundary. And he said, there's no easement here. This is the boundary. You own one side, I own the other. So get off my, and by the way, our client can no longer drive his car up there because of this. Those extra few inches made a huge difference. So our client calls us and says, I need you to come out and tell me that this fence is wrong. So we go out, and if there was ever a fence that was built textbook on the boundary, it's this one. If you're ever teaching how to build a fence on a boundary, this is the fence. It is exactly where it should be. We couldn't find a single piece that was in any way done wrong. There was no easement. That is the boundary. And yet, when our client moved in, they were told a completely different story by both listing agent and buying agent. So again, guys, a great opportunity for you guys to say, I'm going to inform my client and make sure they understand everything about this particular property, and then they can make an informed decision. This client, he said to us, my next step is to sue my agent. So I don't know if he did, I don't know what came out of it, but not a happy client, not a happy homeowner then. Best advice. My only question here is, they went to this much trouble. Why didn't they spell you out completely? I don't get it. But kind of a cool one here, right? You stole my land. So to finish up, your client's in a boundary dispute and they're calling you. You want to give good, useful advice and you don't want to get dragged in. What do you tell them? We've been over this. Try as hard as you can to resolve it between yourselves. Get a surveyor involved to confirm boundary locations and get a survey plan. If you can't resolve it between yourselves, then hire a lawyer that specializes in this stuff, or in title insurance. Usually they specialize in both, because it could be that a title insurance claim is the way to go. Or, of course, as we said, walk away if you just don't want to go through all the hassle. Do it yourself, hire a lawyer, nothing in between, or walk away. That's essentially it, guys. So if this was valuable to you, take a look at the Boundary Wise Academy. You will absolutely love it. What is it? It's an online education program, a really high-end education program for Ontario Realtors. It's 8 courses not taught by OREA or RICO or the new Humber system. It involves 7 to 10 hours of video training and course notes. You get to see me in a shirt and tie, which I refuse to wear since COVID. It's never happening again. I'm telling you now, a golf shirt with a collar is as good as it gets. You get to take it at your own pace. You can start today, finish tomorrow. You can start today, finish in a month. It's up to you. Start, stop, review, go back, go forwards. And there's quizzes and exams all the way through. We've designed this with a really good quality system to make sure that this stuff sticks with you. You get knowledge, you get tools and resources, you get process, you get the kind of stuff we talked about today on all manner of topics, from how to read a survey plan to boundary disputes, to title insurance and how to navigate that, easements and right-of-ways, the parcel register, how to read the parcel register, legal descriptions, all of that great stuff. So when you graduate, I'm only going to focus on the top two, the really important ones. You get the boundary-wise, the professional boundary-wise designation, CBW. Put it after your name, put it on your business card. It means something. And those of you who listen to AM radio in the GTA, you will have started hearing our ads now. And knowing that we've got a great number of ads out there promoting this program to consumers. You also get hotline support for a year. What does that mean? Right now, if you call us, and you say, Chris, I've got a survey, can you check it for me? I've got an issue, blah, blah, blah. We're gonna say to you, sure, $150, go over here, swipe your credit card, and we'll do a consult for you. If you are a boundary-wise graduate, actually, if you've just enrolled, you get it the second you enroll, you can call us as many times in that year as you want with those kind of questions, zero cost.
Oh,
zero cost.
Are you sure?
Free consult, yeah, absolutely. Free consultations. You can stop the recording. You can stop the recording just before. Guys, this isn't just a designation that's a fancy designation. This is value to you. You get more leads, more listings, you protect your higher commissions, and you complete safer deals. This is designed to help you drive your business. Come to boundarywise.ca. Please check it out. This entire thing is regularly priced at $350. Use the discount code up here, BWKW50, and get $50 off that. $300, guys. 2 consults pays for it. So
no kidding. That's crazy value. You just have to commit to actually doing the work.
And you know what? We found people are really enjoying it for some strange reason. It's not too onerous. One of the things we're hearing over and over again, and I'm not saying this well, I guess I am tooting our own horn because we're really proud of the work we did here. We worked our asses off for a year to produce this system. We've heard over and over again, this is singularly the best education realtors have taken in their entire career. And we're really proud of that. So come on board, join up, and let's do some damage.
No, that's fantastic. And I would imagine, because especially, David's like, where do I sign up? Whether you're new in the business and just haven't had experience with it, or, some of us who have been around for longer than dinosaurs, and we forget how this stuff works, or there's a change, or we just get busy and we just don't pay attention to it.
I think it's the change. I think it's the change, Irene. I think for agents who are more established, it's the fact that things are constantly changing. What is true today with respect to boundaries was not true 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And specifically in terms of how the courts work, how the law works, how the law is applied, easements have changed dramatically in the last 5 years. So whatever you learned even 5 years ago from us has changed. And so being part of this keeps you up to date, and it helps differentiate you even more than you already. I know you guys are in the top tier anyway, but this helps maintain that differentiation.
And for anybody on the call, on the Zoom, that has any specific questions, David and Chris and I go back quite a ways. So if you have some specific questions that you don't want to ask in front of Chris, we will gladly answer them for you in private. There's glowing reviews.
Is this a scam? No, it's not.
No.
I have a question, Chris.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi. So who pays to move the fence if the fence is not on the boundary? Is that share cost?
Wow,
What if the neighbor says, okay, I'm not paying it? Like, can you sue the neighbor?
That is one of the smartest questions that rarely comes up, because the question really is, how long is the piece of string? So here's how the questions in return would go to try and determine that. Where is the boundary? First of all, okay, we know where the boundary is. Whose side of the boundary is the fence on? Okay, it's on our side. Therefore, technically, we own the fence, which means technically, and don't stop the recording here, it means technically we can do whatever we want with that fence because it's on our property and we own it. Don't stop the recording there. You got to listen to the next piece. fences are considered shared unless the entire expense has been borne by the one owner. So if you built that fence yourself at your expense on your side of the property line, you can do whatever the heck you want with it. If it was intended to be a shared fence and should be on the property line and needs to be moved, it depends if you've got a cooperative neighbor or not. They might say, you know what, it needs to be on the property line. Yes, I'll lose a foot of my land, but yes, I'll share the cost to put the new fence up on the property line. They might say, I don't want it moved. You want to move it? You pay for it. This is your own negotiation. The string is as long as you negotiate it to be.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I guess just to add to Hanusha's question, what if it's a pretty big tab and you don't want to pay it and the other person needs to pay it and they say, like Hanush said, I'm not paying it.
Sucks to be you. Sorry. There's a much more elegant way of saying that, I'm sure, but
yeah, but we get that's actually a really good way of putting it to the agents because it's yeah,
but that's when you can put a lien on title.
Well, yes,
and when
and
you
no.
go to sell it, it's a problem.
You can, and now you've got to start, and that's the avenue of going towards a lawyer. Go to a lawyer, get that figured out that way. If in fact it is on the boundary, and you can prove that it is on the boundary, and you can prove that it is a shared fence, and it's somehow in danger of falling down. If it's a beautiful fence and it's just a cosmetic move, you're not going to be able to put a lien on title for that. But if it's a danger, or if there's some sort of hazard around it, then maybe a judge will grant that. Maybe the system will grant that. But again, you're talking about spending money with a lawyer to do that kind of thing. It's complicated, but it all starts with confirm where the boundary is and where the fence actually is relative to that boundary. Anyone else? Are we good for a Wednesday afternoon? Let's do this again, guys. This was fun.
Yeah, no, this is great. Chris, thank you so much. Just for anybody who didn't hear earlier, if you guys have any questions about Protect Your Boundaries, please come to us. We will answer them. And I would highly encourage you guys that do have some time on your hands to really consider this. It sounds like a great accreditation. I'm putting it on my list. I don't know when I'm going to get to it, but I'm definitely at least putting it on my list.
Yeah,
How long is the discount code good for?
Sorry, what's that?
How long is the discount code good for?
Until you sign up, David.
Okay, I'm signing up, but I got to send my RICO update first.
That's okay. But David, the good news for you is you've seen all of these so many times. You'll pass all the exams without even looking.
There's an exam?
You'll be. Oh yeah. Oh, by the way, so my good friend John Meehan, who you might know from Remax Hallmark, super guy. He took it. He signed up and he took it because he was the broker and he wanted to demonstrate to his group that I'm behind this. He calls me up and says, Chris, there's something wrong. I keep failing the exams. There's something wrong with your system. And we said, no, John, there's nothing wrong with our system. The problem is you're too used to real estate courses and exams where you can sit and press the space bar while you're watching Netflix. So you actually have to concentrate and learn something here, but it's good because it separates the wheat from the chaff.
I think it's great that you do that, Chris, because I think there are enough courses out there where you really do just click the button and you get the letters and it really doesn't mean anything. So I think it's great that you're doing that. At least you have to think about it before you get the button.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Guys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Super
really
to be with you.
Okay, bye, Chris. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.